The Pittsburgh Steelers had a very interesting offseason looking ahead of them. You know, you're losing Ben Roethlisberger, the guy you deemed as he was your franchise for so many years, stepping off towards retirement. This is also the last season for Kevin Colbert, the Steelers GM. So it's how are they going to draft and attack it this year? The question was, who's going to be the quarterback? Was one going to fall for them based off all the pre-draft projections that were out there? We knew it wasn't a highly rated quarterback class, but still, you're sitting at 20. That's not normally where you can get the top quarterback, and the Steelers did just that at pick 20 in the first round, getting Kenny Pickett, the quarterback from Pitt, the guy literally playing inside of Heinz Field. I feel like if they didn't take Kenny Pickett and they would have went with like Malik Willis, this really would have been an indictment on Kenny Pickett and how the rest of the NFL thought about him. Like the Steelers almost had to take Kenny Pickett in a bit of a way.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have to. If they thought that Malik Willis was better, they would have. But I think
Willis has the highest upside.
Oh, he definitely has the highest upside. I don't think there's any questioning that. The physical ability of Malik Willis is fantastic. I think when it comes to the process of Malik Willis, I think that's where the questions really come into play. And will he be able to pick all of this stuff up? Now, Kenny Pickett, he got tagged a little bit as the most NFL ready prospect. And I still think that Desmond Ridder is probably the most ready when it comes to his mental process.
He's certainly seen the most.
Yes. And with him, there's still inconsistencies with Kenny Pickett. Like, yes, he is a quick decision maker a lot of the times, but there are inconsistencies when it comes to him delivering passes at the right place at the right time. But he is a far more accurate passer than Desmond Ridder. That was Ridder's biggest, flaw in this. Yep. And we have a comment about Golden Corral having the highest upside in this class. Listen, Matt Corral is an incredibly fun prospect. He has the quickest release in the class. He has
you can tell he was a baseball player. You can tell he played short.
Good athleticism. That offense was unwatchable when it comes to his evaluation. There were very, very, very few pro concepts in that passing attack. He didn't really have to be asked to do anything outside of read linebacker, get the ball out on the RPO because they ran 70+% of them.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with with Carson Strong and also throw Sam Howell in here. We had a bunch of guys that ran a ton of RPO. That doesn't necessarily work in the NFL. So it's hard to get a true gauge on how these quarterbacks are going to perform the next level.
Yes, and it was even worse for Matt Corral. I've never seen an offense do what they did. And listen, that's the way that he thought that he could win football games in the SEC. They were underpowered. Obviously, it's Ole Miss. It's not Alabama. So you have to try to do things to put linebackers and safeties in difficult positions, have to make difficult decisions. And it just kind of makes things a little bit easier. It's harder to do at the NFL level because the downfield rules for linemen are so much different. You get 3 yards in college football. You only get a yard in the NFL. Things become more difficult. You really have to get the ball out quick on RPOs at the NFL level. There's far less 3-level RPOs. So it'll be really interesting to see how that ends up going.
Yeah, I think Matt Corral is going to be one of those really interesting prospects moving forward. I think it's kind of the whole trend with this draft class when it comes to quarterbacks. How do they move forward later on? Was this as bad as a lot of people think it was? Or a couple of years down the line, we're like, hey, maybe this class isn't as quite the 2013 level in terms of quarterback draft class. Maybe we can find some gems out of here. I think the Steelers also hope that they found a gem in the second round, pick 52 with George Pickens. I love George Pickens. Body control is fantastic. Hands are as soft as Ben Simmons. The guy has incredible body control when he's up there in the air. And they needed another receiver. You don't have James Washington on the team. He's now a Dallas Cowboy. Ray McLeod went over to the San Francisco 49ers. Deontay Johnson the last year of his contract. So I think if you bring in a quarterback, you need to bring in some additional pass catchers. I was surprised to see Pickens still sitting here at 52. I thought he'd go a little bit early in the second round, but I know there's been some concerns about, maturity on the field. I think we've all seen the video of him in the fight against Georgia Tech where he literally says, hey, look, here's the wall. I'm putting your helmet through it, and literally runs him into the wall. So, I mean, if the Steelers keep him under control, which I think they will, this is one of those organizations that doesn't really tolerate those kind of things. I think Pickens could be a sensational option, not just this year, pushing Chase Claypool, but then taking over potentially be that number one in 2023.
Yeah, and with Pickens and with receivers in Pittsburgh in general, like, listen, they've always had personalities there. Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster,
Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace was another. They've always had those types of guys the guys that really like, oh, we might need to put a little bit of a leash on these guys so they don't get a little bit too out of control. And George Pickens is going to be that guy, but Pittsburgh fans are going to love George Pickens because of that attitude that he brings. He is that blue collar fighter. You guys saw the way that he looked when he got drafted into the NFL, standing there, hunchback a little bit with the ski mask on. It was a hilarious sight, and it just dives.
The comments on that picture and that video were hilarious. I saw people saying like 50-50 odds, Pro Bowl, suspension. Like there's no in between. Like some of the comments were hilarious on that video.
But that's it. It's Pro Bowl or suspension, and that's really what it looks like with George Pickens. It'll be really interesting to see how Pittsburgh's able to kind of keep him grounded. Usually when money comes into the play in the second contract, that's when we kind of start to see those things.
Cough, Antonio Brown, cough.
But I think we'll be okay for a little while, and I do think that he has the physical ability to end up being that wide receiver one for them.
Yeah, I think he absolutely can too. Later on in the draft, we see the Steelers bring in DeMarvin Neal, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, to play alongside Cam Hayward. They bring in another wide receiver, this time in the smaller but lightning quick Calvin Austin III, highly productive receiver out of Memphis. You're talking about the guy that filled in for Ray McLeod last year. All of a sudden, you bring in Calvin Austin III. That makes a ton of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then in round 6, pick 225, it's another family connection. Connor Hayward. What I thought was interesting with this one was like he apparently did not even tell Cam that this was happening until after the pick came through. Like it's not surprising, but can you imagine the type of hazing he's going to get when they get to Latrobe when camp opens up? Like Connor's going to be in for a hell of a summer with Cam being there carrying his pads.
How many, dude? They have 3 family members, right?
Watts, Edmonds, and the Haywards.
Yes, they have all 3. It's amazing that they're just collecting families in Pittsburgh. But it kind of makes sense because when you look at the Steelers organization, they've had 3 head coaches. Like it's a kind of a family thing there. So
3 head coaches, and the only ownership's only been in one family. It's been nothing but the Rooneys.
Yes. And so it's not crazy for them to see them draft Connor Haywood, but getting back to the Austin pick really quickly, man. Yeah. The value there was outrageous.
Too good.
I really love that pick. I like it way more than Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round, and we'll get to that later. For sure. But I liked Austin more than Wan'Dale just as a whole, just stacked together. So to get him 2 rounds later and then to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I got into an argument about this on Twitter about how they develop wide receivers. And I always said,
wait, you got into an argument on Twitter? That doesn't happen.
Right. They do a really good job of developing talent at wide receiver, specifically in Pittsburgh. Yeah. And I think a guy like Calvin Austin, a guy like George Pickens, those are 2 guys that have that type of upside. It'll be really interesting to see how hard they do hit at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think with Calvin Austin, he's one of the guys, once you get him in space, he's so deadly. That's the big thing with him. Is they move him around. You want to use a ton of pre-snap motion, kind of get him in a better situation. Like, I love motion. It's free. Use the damn thing. Like, there's no reason not to in the NFL level. Calvin Austin, I think he's just a chess piece for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Whoever's under center, whether it's Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett this year, because Tomlin did come out and say, look, this will be an open competition sitting here in year 1. I don't personally necessarily care who wins. Like, if you want to give Kenny Pickett time to sit behind someone, I'm fine with it. If it's Mitch Trubisky, you want to let him run. Hey, if he performs well, he increases trade capital at that point in 2023. Like, I'm okay if Kenny Pickett has to sit for a little bit. We'll see him under center probably at some point this season if Trubisky does have some issues, but I'm fine regardless of who's under there. But you've got to have options at receiver, and they did that. They brought in a little bit of extra offensive line help. I think the board didn't necessarily fault him the way they would have liked maybe with some of these offensive tackles. That's not surprising. It was going to be heavy in the draft on those offensive tackles. They were probably going to go quickly. That's why Kenny Pickett was available at 20. That's why you could get George Pickens at 52 because the offensive lineman went quickly. So hopefully some of those additions they made will not only make it easier on the quarterback, but especially also for Najee Harris, who, despite leading the NFL in touches last year, was brutal when it came to running ball efficiently because, like, I think it was of his 3.9 yards, 2.97 per carry were after contact. That's not going to work in the NFL, especially for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've got to be able to run the ball efficiently, and also got to be able to stop it, which is what they're hoping with round 7, pick 225, round 7, Mark Robinson, the linebacker out of Ole Miss. And one I thought was interesting was at round 7, pick 241. They bring in Chris Olukund. I believe I pronunciate his last name. I'm white and I'm from Indiana. I can't say anything other than Smith. Quarterback out of South Dakota State. The reason I say that's interesting is because Carson Strong was still on the board. So you bring him in instead of one of these other quarterbacks that were potentially out there. To me, that just pretty much says, hey, Mason Rudolph, thank you for your service, bud. But we're going to be moving on now, which I think some Pittsburgh Steelers fans might be pretty happy with when that day finally happens.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Mason Rudolph was never the guy.
No, we knew
that.
To
have to watch him play like real football that mattered was tough. It was rough. To see a guy that big, that well built as a quarterback, have such and I like this is obviously he throws the ball way better than I could ever throw a football, but for his size, for the lack of velocity that he is able to generate with that massive frame, it never made sense to me. So, bye Mason, bye.
Yeah. Like I said, overall, I thought this was a pretty good draft for the Steelers based on where they were at and their needs. I like this form. Is it going to be one of the best grades that we give out for some of these teams? No, probably not. But I think it addressed a ton of needs. Look, if you're a Steelers fan, let us know what you thought about the Pittsburgh Steelers draft haul from the 2022 NFL draft. Let us know down in the comments. Hit that like, hit the subscribe buttons. You guys get to know more from Pro Football Network.